Hi, I'm Talia Rugg, a queer Jewish artist who's actually relatively new to photography. While I have explored many forms of media in the past, I am most experienced in oil painting, charcoal, and watercolor, and it was with the latter that I began the process that turned into my current show. I knew since doing a research project on him in a previous class that I was interested in the work of James Turrell, specifically the types of works shown here. Turrell is best known for his striking use of light, not only as inspiration, but as subject and medium too. While Turrell has explored light in many ways, including the play of shadows on model structures and the shaping of light on the large scale in a crater he purchased later in his career, I am most interested by his installations like these. I'm drawn to the effects his light have on the physical senses and the effects that his experiential exhibits have on one's perceptions and state of mind. My very first idea for my exhibit was markedly different from the final project. I planned to construct a metal figure with a projection system housed inside. At this time, in addition to Turrell, I was very influenced by the aesthetics of the movie Nine, the idea of light as soul for mechanical beings in More Than Meets the Eye, and the steampunk opera The Dolls of New Albion. The construction of this original idea did not turn out to be feasible, so I began to focus more on the effect of light itself, rather than housing that light in the mechanical forms and aesthetics of my influences. This is when I turned to watercolor as a possible medium. Out of additive materials, this seemed like one of the better ones for showcasing light. At this time, I attempted to use photographs I took as inspiration. In doing so, I realized that even watercolor could not capture the soft gradation of light and color that interested me in the photos I was taking. After taking this photo, I decided that despite my lack of experience in photography, it was the best and most direct medium for capturing what I felt was truly remarkable in the light I was seeing. One of these special qualities of light is the gentle way in which it can diffuse. This is very apparent in many of Turrell's works, and he uses it to his advantage to create soft-edged compositions that seem to make the walls and floors around viewers melt away. None of the physical mediums I tried could accurately and faithfully capture that delicate gradation. I was also interested in the sensation of light coming up and out toward the viewer, rather than bouncing off of an artwork. I experimented with backlighting, drawn and painted pieces, but while these were backlit, they blocked too much of the light from reaching my eyes, and I was unable to achieve the unique sensory experience that I sought. I realized then that one of the aspects of light that interested me most was the way in which we perceive and engage with it as the basis of our visual system. The sensation of color is not present in all animals, but the visual processing of light is ancient. Eye spots, evolutionary predecessors to eyes, and part of the visual systems of some animals living today, are made of cells capable of sensing light. Animals with eye spots can only understand the visual world in terms of light and dark, while the human visual system allows for a far more nuanced understanding of the world around us. Contrasting light and shadow is one of the most basic and fundamental aspects of animal sight, including our own. For these reasons, light was an important starting point and focus of my work. As I continued to explore my interest in the beauty and unique visual qualities of light, I discovered other aspects of my work that merited further exploration. One such area was color. It became obvious very quickly that I was interested in using it in my work. Black and white photography would have offered an equal and perhaps even more direct look at light, but after experimenting with removing color from my pieces and photographing less colorful items, I felt strongly that color was playing an important part in my work. This helped me realize that it's not only the presence of light in Turrell's art that makes it so compelling to me. Rather, his choice of colors is a fundamental part of the experience he offers to viewers. His exhibit Into the Light at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, for example, is very much about the sensation of color. Viewers step into a room and their vision is flooded with colored light. When I visited, this color was a slowly changing hue in the yellow-orange range. Upon looking back out into the entryway, viewers perceive the white room as dark blue, and in this way their perception of the color of the world around them is manipulated in a fascinating and exciting way. While the colors in my own works do not flood the senses in the same way, They're still part of the experience, calling to mind different associations from viewer to viewer, providing visual interest, and implying meaning in different ways than black and white versions of the pieces would. The other area of interest and importance in my works is the idea of depth. I've been interested for a long time in the aesthetics of images like these, which use offset multiples of an image to indicate a blurred, three-dimensional effect. They usually make use of blue and red tinted layers, such as the kind used in 3D glasses, and sometimes split the image further into separate hues. While these function on flat planes, it is this sort of aesthetic that inspired me to offset the layers of my works and put physical distance between them. The idea of depth as an aspect of human physical perception has been of interest to me since my childhood. When I was very young, I did not have depth perception. Some of my earliest memories involve visits to the eye doctor, where, after the usual business of shining bright lights in my face and puffing air into my eyes, he would test me on how flat my world appeared. I remember the specifics of these tests. The first involved grabbing the wings of a large image of a fly, which were meant to appear as though they were lifted up off the bug's body. The last, which I consistently failed until very late into my post-surgery development, involved looking at rows of bullseyes and identifying which of the 4 or 5 groups of rings hovered up above the rest. I remember what it was like to see fields of flat circles and guess at random until it became clear that I had no idea what I was supposed to be seeing. And I also remember what it was like to come back to that familiar test one day and finally, startlingly, see delicate wings rise to greet me. Now that I have touched on the development of and influences on my pieces, I want to explain some of the work that went into creating them. To make my photographs, I used light sources such as lamps and fairy lights. Against these strong lights, in a darkened room, I arranged various objects and photographed them through a semi-translucent sheet. As my compositions developed, I experimented with creating multiple layers in the space being photographed by placing one sheet over the initial composition and adding additional objects on top, using a second sheet to photograph through. At times, I ran into difficulty when attempting to preserve the darks of the composition, since objects only remained dark if they were pressed tightly against the sheets, but in doing so gained clarity that sometimes made the objects too present, recognizable, and less an abstract part of the composition. In my early photos, I worked a lot with translucent materials, such as soda bottles and colored plastic. Multicolored ping-pong balls provided background color in many later works, and I also found that I enjoyed using them as areas of contrasting color in larger pieces. I was particularly drawn to the orange ping-pong balls for this purpose, because the way I photographed them reminded me of egg yolk, and I then arranged some of my pieces to remind me of being inside an egg, womb, or soft and enclosed space. These photographs of embryo-like subjects were one part of a quasi-scientific theme I discovered in my work. One of my early pieces struck me as reminiscent of slides placed under a microscope. This theme came up in some discussions with professors, and became even more salient once I began making my work physical. To translate my photographs from the digital to physical realm, I printed them on translucent paper. In this sort of paper, areas of white are printed clear, meaning that when they are shown on top of a light source, the light will come through the strongest and least obstructed in those areas. In some of my tests, the display of small images on these light sources reminded my professors even more directly of slides under a microscope. For me, this vague theme of nature and science culminated in experimenting with different orientations of layers of the photo. I had realized somewhat early on that I would need to display my photos with multiple layers of prints per piece, because one layer looked too washed out, and did not show the depth of color and darks that the digital version contained. I also wanted to put physical distance between each layer. In some of my early designs for my show, I had considered building deep light boxes to allow for many inches of space between each print. This idea was condensed for the final work, and I ended up using sheets of plexiglass to both hold the prints in place and offer some space between them. Each piece was therefore made from translucent prints, a small, portable tracing table as a light source, plexiglass sheets, and tape as binding. During my experiments with arranging layers of prints to best make use of this depth, my professor Erin helped introduce me to another opportunity afforded by the way in which I was constructing and showing my photos. My original compositions were all asymmetrical, but by flipping or rotating some of the physical layers, they could take on new symmetry and become entirely new compositions. The first composition created in this way reminded me strongly of a surreal sort of insect, much like a distorted version of the fly in my old depth perception tests. While I preserved the original composition of some of my works, I was also interested in this new way of showing my work, and I found something poetic in bringing together the undertones of surreal semi-scientific associations in my work into one representative to me of the experiences that marked the very beginning of my exploration into depth. These are the associations that my work brings to mind for me. Every viewer's experience has been different, however, and the vagueness of subject matter allows viewers to draw their own connections and make their own conclusions about what they are seeing. Tying each work together, however, is the light that has kept my interest since the beginning. Thank you to my professors and friends who have offered feedback and guidance, and to my family for encouraging my exploration of a medium I had previously never touched. Please enjoy the show.